One word. That was all it took to turn the most dangerous room in New York City into a graveyard of silence. One accidental slip of the tongue that should have signed her death warrant. When Evelyn whispered, "Baby," in a room full of loaded Glocks and cold-blooded killers, she didn't realize she was speaking to Damien Moretti, the capo of the East Coast. Most people beg for mercy when they offend the devil. But Damien didn't pull the trigger. He just leaned in, eyes dark as the abyss, and whispered a command that would change her life forever. Say it again. But slower. The humidity in the kitchen of the obsidian room was suffocating, a stark contrast to the glacial air conditioning of the VIP lounge just beyond the double doors. Evelyn Vance wiped a bead of sweat from her forehead, adjusting the uncomfortable collar of her server's uniform. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was a paralegal student at NYU, drowning in student loans, not a high-end cocktail waitress. But when her sister, Sarah, had called in a panic needing $5,000 for an emergency surgery for her daughter, Lily, Evelyn had taken the shift. The Obsidian Room wasn't just a club. It was a fortress located in the basement of a nondescript brutalist building in Tribeca. It was where the city's elite and its underworld came to discuss things that couldn't be said over the phone. Table 4 needs a refill on the Louis XIII. Now, Vance! The floor manager, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, hissed, shoving a crystal tray into her hands. And for God's sake, don't look them in the eye. You drop that bottle, and your life isn't worth the glass shards. Evelyn nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. She adjusted her Bluetooth earpiece. It was hidden under her hair, a direct line to Sarah, who was currently having a meltdown at the hospital. Evelyn had kept the line open to comfort her, muting herself whenever she entered the main room. "I can't do this, Evelyn." Sarah's voice crackled in her ear, sobbing. "The doctors are saying if we don't pay the deposit in an hour." Evelyn pushed through the heavy velvet curtains into the lounge. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The air smelled of expensive cigars, leather, and gunpowder masked by cologne. The lighting was dim, casting long shadows over men in $5,000 Brioni suits. Table 4 was in the far corner, secluded by a wall of semi-transparent glass. Sitting there was a man who looked like he had been carved out of marble and nightmares, Damien Moretti. Even Evelyn, who kept her head down in her law books, knew the name. The press called him a shipping magnate. The streets called him the Reaper. He was arguing with a man across from him, a rival associate named Lucas from the Russo family. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Damien's hand was resting casually on the table, but his knuckles were white. Evelyn approached silently, her hands trembling as she reached for the empty glasses. "You think you can squeeze me out of the waterfront contracts?" Damien's voice was a low rumble, smooth but terrifying. "I built those docks." "Times change, Damien," Lucas sneered. "Maybe you're getting soft." In Evelyn's ear, Sarah's sobbing intensified. "I'm going to lose her, Evelyn. I'm going to lose my baby." Evelyn's heart broke. Without thinking, forgetting she was standing between two mob bosses on the brink of war, she tapped her earpiece to unmute it, intending to whisper a quick reassurance to her sister. She leaned over to place a coaster down, right next to Damien's hand. At that exact moment, Damien slammed his hand on the table to emphasize a point to Lucas. Evelyn flinched, the bottle of cognac wobbling. In the chaos of the movement, looking down at the table, she whispered urgently into the headset. "It's okay, baby. Just breathe. I'm handling it." The silence that followed was absolute. The music didn't stop, but the world around Table 4 seemed to freeze. Lucas's eyes went wide, his jaw dropping as he looked from the waitress to the Don. The three bodyguards standing behind Damien stiffened, hands reaching into their jackets. Evelyn froze, realizing her mistake. She wasn't looking at her headset. She was looking directly at Damien Moretti. Damien slowly turned his head. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, cold and calculating. He ignored Lucas completely. He ignored the millions of dollars in contracts. He looked up at the trembling waitress who had just called the most feared man in New York, baby, in the middle of a power play. Damien didn't shout. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply sat back in his leather chair, a slow, predatory smirk curling the corner of his lip. It was a look of dangerous amusement. "Excuse me?" Damien asked, his voice dropping an octave. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She tapped the earpiece frantically to mute it, her face burning. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean..." Damien raised a hand, silencing her. He stood up, towering over her. He was massive, over 6'3", radiating a heat and power that made her knees weak. He took a step closer, invading her personal space, trapping her between the table and his formidable presence. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear, close enough that she could smell the scent of sandalwood and danger. "Don't apologize," he whispered, loud enough for Lucas and the guards to hear. "Say it again, but slower." Evelyn stopped breathing. Her mind raced, looking for an exit strategy, but she was surrounded. To her left, Damien's second-in-command, a scarred man named Matthew, was watching her with narrow, suspicious eyes. To her right, the exit was blocked by 2 more guards. Sir, please," Evelyn stammered, her voice trembling. "It was a misunderstanding. I was on the phone with..." "On the phone?" Damien pulled back slightly, his eyes scanning her face. He saw the terror there, but he also saw something else. Defiance. She wasn't crying. She was calculating. He liked that. Damien turned to Lucas, who was still staring in disbelief. "Lucas, get out. The deal is off. If I see your men near the Brooklyn Navy Yard again, I won't be sending a contract. I'll be sending a hearse." Lucas opened his mouth to protest, but one look from Damien shut him down. The rival boss scrambled up, gathered his papers, and fled the VIP section, casting one confused look back at the waitress, who had seemingly tamed the beast. Once they were alone, Damien sat back down and gestured to the empty seat across from him. "Sit." "I can't," Evelyn said, gripping the tray. "My manager. Your manager works for the building owner. The building owner works for me. Sit." Evelyn sat. Damien poured 2 glasses of the Louis XIV cognac. He slid one toward her. "You just saved me a lot of bullets, Kara." Lucas was stalling. He thought I was on edge, weak. "But you..." He chuckled darkly. "You made him think I was so relaxed, so untouchable that I let my mistress serve drinks during a sit-down." "I'm not your mistress," Evelyn said, her voice finding a shred of strength. "And I need to go. My niece is in the hospital. That's who I was talking to." Damien paused, the glass halfway to his lips. "The baby?" "She's 5. She needs surgery." Evelyn felt the tears pricking her eyes again. "I picked up this shift to pay the deposit. So if you're going to kill me for being unprofessional, just do it quickly. I have somewhere to be." Damien studied her. He had spent 20 years reading liars and thieves. He knew when someone was telling the truth. He looked at her cheap shoes, the frayed hem of her skirt, the desperation in her hazel eyes. He pulled a sleek black smartphone from his jacket pocket and dialed a number. "Matthew," Damien said, not taking his eyes off Evelyn. "Call St. Jude's and Mount Sinai. Find out where He looked at Evelyn. "Last name?" "Vance." "Lily Vance," she whispered. "Find out where Lily Vance is admitted. Pay the bill, all of it, and put her in a private suite." Evelyn gasped. "What? No, I can't. Why would you do that?" Damien hung up the phone and placed it on the table. Because you owe me now, and I don't deal in small favors." "I owe you?" Evelyn asked, incredulous. "You just said I saved you bullets. You also humiliated a rival capo, which means Lucas is going to wonder who you are. He's going to dig, and when he finds out you're just a waitress, he's going to realize I played him. He'll come for you to get to me." Damien leaned forward, his gaze intense. "You are now involved, Miss Vance, whether you like it or not." Evelyn felt the room spin. "So, what do you want?" "I need a shield," Damien said calmly. "The Russo family is aggressive. They think I'm solitary, vulnerable because I have no heirs, no wife, no attachments. They think they can strike because I have nothing to lose." He took a sip of the cognac. "I need them to believe I have a weakness, a new obsession, someone I'm protecting. It will draw them out into the open so I can crush them." Evelyn shook her head. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend?" "Not girlfriend," Damien corrected, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "My fiancée." "You're insane," Evelyn said, standing up too. "I'm a law student. I have a life. I'm not playing house with the Mafia." "Your niece's surgery cost $80,000. It's already paid," Damien said coldly. "And Lucas Russo has men outside this club right now. If you walk out that door alone, you won't make it to the subway station." He extended a hand toward her. It was large, calloused, and steady. 6 months, Evelyn. You live in my penthouse. You wear the clothes I buy. You attend the galas I tell you to. You play the part of the woman who tamed Damien Moretti. In exchange, your niece gets the best medical care in the world, your student loans are erased, and you walk away with $5 million in cash. Evelyn looked at his hand. It was a deal with the devil, but outside, the rain was starting to fall on the cold New York streets, and her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "They just moved Lily to a VIP room. They're prepping her for surgery." "Evelyn, what did you do?" "Thank you." "Thank you." Evelyn looked up into Damien's storm-grey eyes. She realized there was no going back. The baby slip-up had sealed her fate. She took his hand. 6 months, she said. "But if you touch me without my permission, the deal is off." Damien smirked, closing his fingers around hers. His grip was possessive. "I don't need to force anyone, Evelyn," he said, pulling her slightly closer. "By the end of 6 months, you'll be begging me to touch you." The ride to Damien's penthouse was silent, but it was a silence that screamed. They sat in the back of an armored Cadillac Escalade, separated by a leather console that felt like a continental divide. Evelyn watched the city blur past the tinted windows, the neon lights of Times Square, the dark alleys of Hell's Kitchen, and finally, the towering glass spires of Central Park South. She looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. Just an hour ago, she was worrying about tips and biochemistry exams. Now she was sitting next to a man whose name appeared in redacted FBI files. "Stop shaking," Damien said, not looking up from his tablet. The blue light illuminated the sharp angles of his jaw. "Fear smells, Evelyn. And in my world, predators eat fear." "I'm not scared of you," Evelyn lied, her voice barely a whisper. Damien turned then, a slow, deliberate movement. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers were hot against her cold skin. "Good. Because I'm the safest thing in your life right now. It's everyone else you need to worry about." The car pulled into a private underground garage that looked more like a bank vault. Concrete walls, reinforced steel gates, and men in suits standing at attention as the car stopped. "Welcome home, Bella," Damien murmured as the door opened. The penthouse was a fortress in the sky. It occupied the entire top floor of the Millennium Tower. It was all glass, steel, and black marble. Beautiful, cold, and utterly void of warmth, much like its owner. "Matthew will have your things brought over from your apartment," Damien said, tossing his keys onto a marble island in the kitchen that cost more than Evelyn's tuition. "My roommates," Evelyn started, "think you've gone to study abroad, a last-minute scholarship. It's already been arranged with your university. You're on sabbatical." Evelyn spun around. "You hacked my school records. I donated a new library wing. Same result." Damien walked to a wall of windows overlooking the park. He loosened his tie, the first sign of human fatigue she'd seen. "Rules, Evelyn. We need to establish them." He turned to face her. 1. You never leave this apartment without Matthew or me. 2. You do not answer your phone unless it is a number I have approved. 3. We sleep in the same bed. Evelyn choked on air. "Excuse me? That was not in the deal. I said no touching." "I said I wouldn't touch you without permission," Damien corrected, walking toward her. He moved with the grace of a panther, silent and deadly. "But we have staff here, maids, chefs, security. If they see us sleeping in separate rooms, word gets out. If word gets out, Lucas Russo knows it's a sham. If Lucas knows, you die." He stopped inches from her. "So, we sleep in the same bed. I have a king size. Stay on your side and you'll be safe. Cross the line." His eyes darkened, dropping to her lips. "And I can't promise I'll be a gentleman." Evelyn swallowed hard, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Fine. But I sleep in pajamas. Unflattering ones. Flannel." Damien actually laughed. It was a low, rusty sound, as if he hadn't used it in years. "We have a gala tomorrow night. The St. Clair Foundation. It's the biggest event of the season. Everyone will be there. Politicians, judges, and the 5 families." "Tomorrow? I can't learn to be a mob wife in 24 hours. "You're smart. You're a law student. You know how to read people. Just look at them the way you looked at me when you told me to say it slower." Evelyn flushed. "That was an accident." "Was it?" Damien challenged. "Or did you like the power?" Before she could answer, an older woman bustled into the room. She was short, stout, and carried a garment bag. "Signora Ricci," Damien greeted her with a respectful nod. "Fix her." Signora Ricci looked Evelyn up and down with critical eyes. "Skinny, too American. But she has good bones." She clapped her hands. "Come, Piccola, we have work to do. If you are to stand next to Il Diavolo, you must look like a queen." The next 12 hours were a blur of torture. Evelyn was scrubbed, waxed, polished, and measured. Signora Ricci was a tyrant with a measuring tape. But as Evelyn stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror the next evening, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. The dress was a deep, blood-red silk that clung to every curve of her body like a second skin. It was backless, dipping dangerously low, with a slit that ran up her thigh. Her hair was styled in old Hollywood waves, and around her neck sat a diamond necklace that felt heavy, like a collar. "Perfect," a voice said from the doorway. Evelyn turned. Damien was leaning against the doorframe, wearing a tuxedo that fit him to perfection. He looked devastatingly handsome, but the gun holster visible under his jacket, as he adjusted it, was a stark reminder of who he was. He walked over to her, standing behind her, their reflections meeting in the mirror. He looked like the shadow to her light. "One detail missing," he whispered. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring. It was a diamond the size of a quail egg, set in platinum. He slid it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "My mother's," he said, his voice void of emotion. "Don't lose it. She killed the last man who tried to take it." "Comforting," Evelyn muttered, staring at the rock. Damien, if I mess this up—" "You won't." He turned her around, his hands gripping her waist. "Just remember, you belong to me. Tonight, you are not Evelyn, the waitress. You are Evelyn Moretti, the future wife of the Capo dei Capi. Let them see the fire." He offered his arm. "Shall we go to war, baby?" Evelyn took a deep breath, channeled every ounce of courage she had, and took his arm. "Don't call me baby." "Make me stop," he smirked, leading her to the elevator. The St. Clair Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Temple of Denda was bathed in soft, golden light, playing host to the city's predators disguised in couture. As Damien and Evelyn stepped out of the limousine, the flashbulbs were blinding. The paparazzi screamed Damien's name, hungry for a shot of the recluse billionaire and the mystery woman on his arm. "Head up," Damien murmured, his hand firm on the small of her back. "Look bored. It drives them crazy." Evelyn lifted her chin, adopting the cool, detached expression she'd seen on runway models. She felt Damien's thumb stroke her hip bone through the silk of her dress, a grounding touch that sent electricity shooting up her spine. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and old money. A string quartet played softly in the corner, drowned out by the murmur of hundreds of conversations. As they walked through the crowd, the room seemed to part for them like the Red Sea. Men nodded with deference. Women whispered behind champagne flutes, eyeing Evelyn with a mixture of envy and judgment. "Moretti!" a booming voice called out. Damien stiffened slightly, then relaxed into a mask of casual indifference. "Senator, good to see you." Senator Reeves, a man Evelyn had seen on CNN discussing anti-crime bills, shook Damien's hand warmly. "And who is this vision?" "This is Evelyn," Damien said, pulling her slightly closer. "My fiancé." The senator's eyes widened. "Fiancé? I didn't know you were the settling down type, Damien. I thought you were married to the business." "I met Evelyn, and priorities changed," Damien lied smoothly. Evelyn smiled, extending her hand. "A pleasure, Senator. I've been following your work on the zoning reform bill. Clause 14 is particularly ambitious, though I worry about the constitutionality of the eminent domain adjustments." The senator blinked, stunned. Damien looked down at her, a flicker of genuine surprise and pride in his eyes. "She's well read," the senator stammered. "She's brilliant," Damien corrected. "She's studying law." As they moved away, Damien leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "Clause 14? Show off. I have a 4.0 GPA, Damien. I'm not just a pretty face. I'm starting to see that. Well, isn't this a cozy domestic scene?" The voice was like oil slick on pavement. Evelyn felt Damien's muscles turn to granite against her side. They turned to find Lucas Russo standing there, holding a martini. Next to him was his son, Antonio, a younger, nastier version of his father, with eyes that undressed Evelyn in a way that made her skin crawl. "Lucas," Damien acknowledged with a nod that was more of a warning. "So the rumor is true," Lucas sneered, looking at Evelyn. "The waitress? You really cleaned her up, Damien. How much did the dress cost? More than her life is worth?" Damien took a step forward, but Evelyn squeezed his arm. She remembered the deal. She was the shield. She stepped forward, placing herself slightly in front of Damien. She looked Lucas dead in the eye, channeling the anger of every unpaid bill, every rude customer, and every moment of fear she'd felt in the last 2 days. "It's Evelyn," she said, her voice steady and cold. "And regarding my worth, Mr. Russo, I'm the woman who made Damien Moretti say, 'Please, what have you ever made him do besides check his watch?'" The silence in the immediate vicinity was deafening. Antonio Russo choked on his drink. Damien didn't move, but the corner of his mouth twitched. Lucas's face turned a violent shade of red. "You have a sharp tongue, girl. Be careful you don't cut your own throat with it." "Is that a threat, Lucas?" Damien asked softly. The playfulness was gone. The Reaper was back. "Because if you threaten my future wife in public, I don't need to wait for a sit-down. I can finish this right here, in front of the senator." Lucas glared, his jaw working. "Enjoy the party, Damien, while it lasts." He stormed off, Antonio trailing behind, though the sun cast one last, lingering look at Evelyn that promised retribution. "You have a death wish," Damien hissed as he steered her toward the bar, but his hand was gripping hers tightly, possessively. "I was defending you," Evelyn retorted. "I don't need defending. I need you to stay alive." Damien ordered a whiskey, neat. "But that was impressive." "I hate him," Evelyn admitted, taking a sip of champagne to calm her nerves. "He looks like a reptile." "He is, and he's desperate. That makes him dangerous." Damien scanned the room. His eyes were constantly moving, checking exits, checking hands, checking reflections. "Dance with me," he said suddenly. "What?" "Russo is watching from the balcony. We need to sell it. We need to look in love." He took her glass and set it down, then led her onto the dance floor. The orchestra was playing a waltz. Damien pulled her into his frame, his hand large and warm on her back, guiding her effortlessly. For a moment, Evelyn forgot where she was. She forgot the guns, the threats, the contract. She only felt the strength of his body, the rhythm of his movement. They moved together as if they had been dancing for years. "You're a good dancer for a gangster," she murmured, looking up at him. "My mother insisted on lessons. Said a man who can't lead on the floor can't lead in life." Damien's gaze dropped to her lips. The intensity was overwhelming. "Evelyn, about the other night, when you called me that." "Baby," she teased softly, emboldened by the adrenaline. "Stop it," he warned, but his voice was strained. "Why did you say it?" "I told you, I was talking to my niece." "I know. But when you said it, you weren't looking at your niece. You were looking at me." Evelyn felt a blush rise up her neck. It was the heat of the moment. "Maybe," Damien whispered, leaning closer. "Or maybe you saw something in me that isn't a monster." "I haven't decided yet," she whispered back. Suddenly Damien stopped. His body went rigid. "Damien." He wasn't looking at her. He was looking over her shoulder at a waiter moving through the crowd toward them. The waiter was holding a tray of champagne, but his eyes were fixed on Damien's back, and his hand was sliding under the velvet napkin on the tray. "Down!" Damien roared. He shoved Evelyn hard, sending her crashing to the marble floor. Pop, pop, pop. 3 silenced shots tore through the air where Evelyn's head had been a second ago. A crystal sculpture shattered. Screams erupted. The music died. Evelyn scrambled backward, her dress tearing. She looked up to see Damien moving. He didn't run. He charged. The assassin, dressed as a waiter, raised the gun again. But Damien was already there. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it with a sickening crunch. The gun clattered to the floor. Damien drove a knee into the man's stomach, then grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against a marble pillar. "Who sent you?" Damien roared, his voice shaking the walls. The assassin gasped, blood trickling from his mouth. He tried to reach for a knife in his belt. Damien didn't hesitate. He drew his own weapon, a sleek silver pistol from his holster, and pistol-whipped the man across the temple. The assassin crumpled. Chaos reigned. Guests were stampeding toward the exits. Security guards were swarming. Damien turned, his chest heaving, his eyes wild. He scanned the floor until he found Evelyn. She was sitting amidst the shattered glass, shaking, a smear of blood on her arm from the fall. The rage on Damien's face vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He holstered his gun and ran to her, sliding on his knees to get to her level. "Evelyn, Evelyn, look at me, are you hit?" He ran his hands over her frantically, checking for bullet holes. I'm okay," she gasped, though her ears were ringing. "My arm, just glass." Damien looked at the cut on her arm. His expression hardened into something darker than night. He ripped his pocket square out and pressed it against the wound. "Matthew!" he bellowed without looking away from her. Matthew appeared through the smoke, gun drawn. "Boss, the exits are secured. It was a lone hitter. Russo's men are gone." "Get the car," Damien snarled. "We're leaving. And burn this place to the ground if you have to, but get us out." Damien scooped Evelyn up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She buried her face in his neck, smelling the gunpowder and the sandalwood. "You saved me," she whispered, the shock starting to set in. "I told you," Damien growled, carrying her through the screaming crowd toward the emergency exit. "I protect what's mine." And Russo just made the last mistake of his life. As they burst out into the cool night air, sirens wailing in the distance, Evelyn realized the truth. The game was over. The pretend engagement was gone. They were in a war now. And as she clung to Damien Moretti, she realized that the scariest part wasn't the bullets. It was that in his arms, amidst the violence, she felt safer than she had ever felt in her life. The safe house wasn't a bunker. It was a sprawling, brutalist mansion on the edge of the cliffs in Montauk. The ocean crashed violently against the rocks below, the sound mirroring the chaos inside Damien's mind. It had been 3 hours since the shooting at the gala. Damien hadn't spoken a word since he carried Evelyn into the house. He had deposited her in the master bathroom, a space dominated by black slate and stark white towels. "Sit," he commanded, his voice rougher than gravel. Evelyn sat on the edge of the massive bathtub. She was shivering, shock finally setting in. Her red dress was ruined, torn at the hem and stained with dust, and a smear of blood on her left arm where she'd fallen onto the glass. Damien washed his hands with surgical precision, the water turning pink as he scrubbed the assassin's blood from his knuckles. He didn't look at her. He couldn't. If he looked at her, he would see the fear he had put in her eyes. He turned off the tap, dried his hands, and grabbed a first aid kit from the cabinet. He knelt between her legs, just as he had at the gala. But this time the adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, suffocating guilt. "Give me your arm," he murmured. Evelyn extended her arm. The cut wasn't deep, but it was ugly. Damien cleaned it with antiseptic. She hissed in pain, flinching. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his hands pausing. His fingers, usually so lethal, were trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Evelyn." "It's not your fault," she said softly. "It is entirely my fault." Damien didn't look up. He focused on applying a butterfly bandage. "I dragged you into the light. I put a target on your back to take it off mine. I was arrogant. I thought I could control the board. Tonight proved I can't." He finished the bandage and finally looked up. His grey eyes were haunted. "The deal is off." Evelyn blinked. "What?" "Matthew is outside. He has a car ready. He's going to take you to a private airfield. You'll go to Switzerland. I have a chalet there. You'll stay there until I wipe the Russos off the map. Then you'll be given a new identity, new name, new life. You'll never see me again." He stood up and turned away, unable to bear the sight of her. "Your niece's bills will be paid forever. But you are done with Damien Moretti." Evelyn stared at his broad back. She saw the tension in his shoulders, the isolation of a man who believed he was poison to everything he touched. She thought about the way he had shielded her body with his own. She thought about the way he had decimated the assassin. Most women would run. Most women would take the ticket to Switzerland and never look back. But Evelyn Vance had spent her life fighting poverty, fighting for her sister, fighting for her education. She didn't run. She stood up and walked over to him. She placed a hand on his back. He flinched like he'd been burned. "No," she said. Damien turned around, his expression incredulous. "Did you not hear me? They shot at you. Next time they won't miss." "If I leave now, they win," Evelyn said, her voice gaining strength. "If I disappear, Lucas knows he got to you. He knows you're weak. He'll hunt you down, and then he'll hunt me down anyway because I'm a loose end." "I can protect you better if you're far away," Damien roared, the anger masking his terror. "And who protects you?" Evelyn shouted back. The silence that followed was heavy. Damien stared at her, stunned. "You have guards, Damien. You have soldiers. But you don't have anyone who actually cares if you live or die. You're alone." Evelyn took a step closer, invading his space. "I'm not leaving. We have a deal. 6 months. I don't break contracts." Damien looked down at her, at the fire in her eyes. He felt something crack inside his chest, a wall he had built 20 years ago when his father was murdered in front of him. "You are a foolish woman," he whispered, but there was no bite in it. "And you are a terrible boss," she countered. "You haven't even asked if I'm hungry." Damien let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. He reached out, cupping her face in his large hands. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. "Evelyn," he breathed, his voice dropping to that dangerous velvet whisper. "You stay, and I will burn the world down before I let them touch you again." "I know," she whispered. He leaned in. The air between them crackled with electricity. His lips hovered inches from hers, testing the boundary, waiting for her to pull away. When she didn't, when her eyelids fluttered shut, he closed the distance. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate. It tasted of whiskey and survival. Damien kissed her like he was drowning, and she was oxygen. His hands tangled in her hair, pulling her flush against him. Evelyn wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring him to the earth. For a moment, there was no Mafia, no war, no blood. Just the heat of two people who had looked death in the face and chosen each other. Damien pulled back first, breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. "Go to sleep," he commanded, his voice strained. "If I stay in this room another minute, I'm going to break my promise about waiting 6 months." Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted him to break the promise, but she nodded. "Good night, Damien." He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "Lock it. Don't open it for anyone but me." 3 weeks passed. The war with the Russos had turned into a stalemate of silence, which was worse than the shooting. Business was bleeding. Shipments were being intercepted. Police raids were hitting Damien's warehouses with suspicious accuracy. They were back in the city, but the penthouse felt like a prison now. Damien was barely sleeping. He spent his nights in his study, surrounded by his inner circle, Matthew, his enforcer, and Vittorio, the family lawyer and consigliere. Evelyn had been relegated to the background, playing the role of the dutiful, traumatized fiancé. But Evelyn didn't do background well. While Damien was in meetings, she was in the library, reading. Not novels, but the files Damien left on the secure server. She had noticed something. It was a Tuesday night. A storm was battering New York, rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The mood in the penthouse was toxic. We lost another shipment in Jersey, Matthew said, his voice low. He was pacing the living room, a glass of scotch in his hand. The feds were waiting. They knew the exact container number, Damien. Exact. Damien sat on the leather sofa, staring at the unlit fireplace. He looked exhausted. Only 3 people knew that container number. Me, you, and Vittorio. Vittorio, a sleek man in his 50s, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than a car, shook his head. And the harbour master. The Russo family has deep pockets, Damien. They could have bribed the port authority. The harbour master has been on my payroll for 10 years, Damien snapped. He knows I'd skin him alive. Then we have a leak, Matthew said, touching the gun at his waist. We need to purge the lower ranks. It's not the lower ranks, the voice came from the spiral staircase. The 3 men turned. Evelyn was standing there. She wasn't wearing an evening gown. She was wearing Damien's oversized dress shirt and reading glasses, holding a stack of printed spreadsheets. Evelyn, go back upstairs, Damien warned, his tone sharp. This is not for you. You're losing because you're looking for a soldier, Evelyn said, walking down the stairs. She ignored the warning in Damien's eyes. She walked right up to the coffee table and slammed the papers down. You need to be looking for an accountant. Vittorio chuckled condescendingly. My dear, stick to spending Damien's money. Leave the business to the men. Evelyn turned her gaze on Vittorio. It was the same look she used on difficult professors. I'm a paralegal, Vittorio. I specialize in corporate liability and forensic accounting, and your shell companies are sloppy. The room went dead silent. Damien sat up straighter. Explain. Evelyn spread the papers out. I was bored, so I looked at the acquisition logs for the warehouse properties, specifically the Shell Corporation that owns the Jersey depot. It's registered in the Caymans, under Moretti Holdings. Standard stuff. She pointed to a highlighted line. But the annual filing fees for the holding company aren't being paid from the main account. They're being paid by a secondary LLC called Janus Global. So? Matthew asked, confused. So? Evelyn continued, her voice gaining confidence. I looked up Janus Global. It's a dead end. But the IP address used to file their digital tax returns traces back to a residential address in Scarsdale. She turned slowly to look at Vittorio. Vittorio, don't you have a summer home in Scarsdale? Vittorio's face went the color of ash. He stood up abruptly. This is ridiculous. She's hacking our files. Damien, she's a security risk. She's right, Damien said softly. He wasn't looking at the papers. He was looking at Vittorio. The IP address, is it yours? Damien, I've served your father. I've served you, Vittorio stammered, backing away. The container number, Evelyn cut in, ruthless. It was in the legal manifest sent to the insurance adjuster. Vittorio handles the insurance. Damien stood up. The predator was back. He walked slowly toward the man who had been like an uncle to him. Why? Damien asked simply. Vittorio hit the wall. He was trembling. Russo. He offered me a way out. Immunity. The feds are closing in, Damien. The RICO case is building. I didn't want to die in prison. So you sold me? Damien's voice was devoid of emotion. You sold my men? You sold her? She's nothing, Vittorio spat, pointing at Evelyn. She's a waitress, a distraction. You're losing your edge, Damien. You're weak because of her. Vittorio's hand dipped into his jacket. Don't, Damien said. But Vittorio pulled the gun. Before he could level it, a deafening boom echoed through the penthouse. Vittorio dropped to his knees, a look of shock on his face, before falling forward onto the Persian rug. Evelyn screamed, covering her ears. Damien stood there, his arm extended, smoke curling from the barrel of his silver pistol. He hadn't hesitated. He hadn't blinked. Matthew moved instantly, checking the body. "He's done, boss." Damien didn't lower the gun immediately. He stared at the body of the traitor. Then he turned to Evelyn. She was shaking, staring at the dead man. Damien holstered his weapon and walked to her. He expected her to recoil. He had just executed a man in their living room. "Evelyn," he said cautiously. Evelyn looked up. Her face was pale, but her jaw was set. She looked from the body to Damien. "He was going to kill you," she said, her voice flat. "Yes." "Then you didn't have a choice." Damien let out a ragged breath. He pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. She smelled of vanilla and rain, the only clean thing in his dirty world. "You found the rat," he murmured into her hair. "You saved us." "Again." "I told you," she mumbled against his chest, her hands gripping his shirt. "I'm not just a pretty face." He pulled back, looking down at her with a mixture of awe and raw hunger. The adrenaline of the kill and the relief of survival were mixing into a potent cocktail. "Matthew," Damien said, not looking away from Evelyn, "clean this up. Get the crew ready. We know Russo's playbook now. Tonight, we end the war." "Yes, boss," Matthew said, dragging the body out. Damien took Evelyn's hand. "Come with me." He led her not to the safe room, but to the bedroom. He kicked the door shut and locked it. The storm raged outside, but the storm inside was fiercer. "You watched me kill a man," Damien said, backing her against the door, "and you didn't run." "I'm done running," Evelyn said. She reached up and unbuttoned his collar. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. Damien groaned, a low, animalistic sound. He captured her lips, kissing her with a ferocity that bordered on violence. He lifted her up, wrapping her legs around his waist, and carried her to the bed. "Say it," he growled against her neck as they fell onto the mattress. "Say what?" she gasped. He pulled back, his eyes burning into hers. "Call me what you called me that first night. Call me what makes you mine." Evelyn ran her fingers through his dark hair, pulling him down to her. "Baby," she whispered. Damien Moretti, the devil of New York, surrendered. The end of the war did not come with a bang, but with a whisper. Thanks to Evelyn's discovery of the Janus Global accounts, Damien didn't just find a rat. He found the map to Lucas Russo's entire operation. He found the bribe ledgers, the offshore accounts, and the exact location of Russo's safe house in the Catskills. Damien didn't send an army. He went himself, with Matthew and a select team of 4 men. And he took Evelyn, not into the line of fire, but close enough to watch. She sat in the armored SUV at the base of the private drive, watching the tactical feed on a tablet. She saw the thermal heat signatures of Damien's team breaching the perimeter. She saw the swift, brutal efficiency of the Moretti family when they stopped playing defense and started playing offense. Within 20 minutes, it was over. The radio crackled. "Clear!" "Bring her up." The SUV wound its way up the snowy driveway to the rustic lodge. When Evelyn stepped out, the air was crisp and smelled of pine and cordite. Matthew was waiting at the door. "He's in the study," Matthew said, holstering his weapon. "Damien wants you to see this. He wants you to know it's truly over." Evelyn walked into the study. It was a warm room with a roaring fire, contrasting sharply with the violence that had just occurred. Lucas Russo was on his knees in the center of the room, beaten, bloody, but alive. Damien stood over him, holding a glass of Russo's own scotch. Damien looked up as Evelyn entered. His face was hard, the face of the capo, but his eyes softened when they landed on her. "Evelyn," Damien said, his voice calm. "Come here." She walked to his side. He didn't touch her, but his presence wrapped around her like a shield. "Lucas," Damien said, looking down at his enemy. "You remember Evelyn? The waitress you said wasn't worth the price of her dress?" Lucas spat blood onto the rug. "Go to hell, Moretti. You think this changes anything? The Commission will—" "The Commission knows you stole from the pension fund," Damien interrupted. "Evelyn found the transfers. You were skimming from your own allies, Lucas. No one is coming to save you. You are alone." Lucas's eyes darted to Evelyn. Fear, genuine and cold, finally entered his gaze. "The girl found it?" "The Queen found it," Damien corrected. He crouched down, eye to eye with the defeated boss. "I'm going to give you a choice, Lucas. Because I'm feeling generous. You can sign over your territories in Brooklyn and Queens to me, and you can disappear. Or—" Damien tapped the rim of his glass. "We can finish the conversation we started at the gala." Lucas looked at the gun on the table. He looked at Damien. Then he looked at the contract Matthew slapped onto the floor in front of him. With a shaking hand, Lucas signed. Damien stood up. "Smart choice. Matthew, get him out of my sight. If he's in New York by sunrise, kill him." As Lucas was dragged away, the tension left the room. It was just Damien and Evelyn now. The war was over. The Russos were broken. The Moretti Empire was absolute. But there was one contract left to deal with. 2 days later, the 6-month mark arrived. The penthouse was quiet. The rain had returned to New York, washing away the grime of the city. Evelyn was packing, not the designer gowns or the jewels Damien had lavished on her, but her old clothes, the jeans, the sweaters, the worn-out sneakers. She heard the door open. Damien walked in. He was holding a manila envelope. He stopped when he saw the suitcase on the bed. His jaw tightened, a muscle feathering in his cheek. "You're packing," he stated. "It's been 6 months, Damien," Evelyn said, not looking at him. She folded a t-shirt with trembling hands. "The deal is up. You won. You're safe." Damien walked over and placed the envelope on the bed. "This is it. $5 million. Tax-free. Wired to an account in Zurich, and the deed to an apartment in Paris. It's fully furnished." Evelyn looked at the envelope. It was everything she had ever wanted. Financial freedom. Safety for her niece. A fresh start. "Thank you," she whispered. "You fulfilled your end of the bargain," Damien said. His voice was devoid of emotion, the walls back up. "You were a perfect shield." "Is that all I was?" Evelyn asked, finally looking at him. Damien turned away, walking to the window. "It's what you agreed to be." "That's not what I asked." Damien gripped the windowsill. "Evelyn, leave. Take the money and go. You don't belong in this world. You saw what I did to Vittorio. You saw what I did to Lucas. I am a monster. I have blood on my hands that will never wash off." "I know," Evelyn said. She walked across the room, stopping just behind him. "But you didn't force me to stay at the safe house. You didn't force me to find the accounts. I chose this. You chose survival." Damien spun around, his eyes blazing. "But you don't have to survive anymore. You can live. Go find a nice lawyer or a doctor. Someone who comes home at 5 p.m. and doesn't check the car for bombs." "I don't want a nice lawyer," Evelyn yelled back, tears springing to her eyes. "I want you." "Why?" Damien roared, the pain breaking through his voice. "Why would you want a life of looking over your shoulder?" "Because when I look over my shoulder, you're there," Evelyn said, her voice breaking. "Because you saved my niece without asking for a thing. Because you treat me like an equal, not a prop. Because I love you, you idiot." The silence that followed was heavy, filled only by the sound of the rain. Damien stared at her, his chest heaving. The most feared man in New York looked utterly defeated by a girl in a sweatshirt. You love me?" he whispered, as if the words were a foreign language. "Yes." Evelyn stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest, right over his heart. It was beating wildly. "I love the monster. I love the man. I love the way you look at me when you think I'm not noticing." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the ring, his mother's ring. She had taken it off to pack. She took his hand and placed the ring in his palm. "If you want me to leave, Damien, tell me to go. Tell me you feel nothing. Look me in the eye and tell me I was just an employee." Damien looked at the ring. Then he looked at Evelyn. The walls crumbled. The ice melted. He dropped the ring and grabbed her, pulling her into a crushing embrace. He lifted her off the floor, burying his face in her neck. "I can't," he groaned. "God help me. I can't let you go. You're the only thing that makes sense. You're the only light I have." He set her down, but didn't let go. He framed her face with his hands, his eyes searching hers. "If you stay," he warned, his voice intense, "there is no going back. No Paris apartment. No escape. You will be mine until the day I die. And I will burn the world for you every single day." Evelyn smiled, wiping a tear from his cheek. "I don't want Paris," she whispered. "I want to be right here." Damien picked up the ring from the floor. His hands, usually so steady with a gun, were shaking slightly as he slid it back onto her finger. "Then stay," he commanded softly. "Marry me. Be the queen of this city." Evelyn looked at the diamond, then up at the man who would kill and die for her. "Yes," she said. Damien smirked, the old arrogance returning, but tempered with a deep, abiding love. He pulled her close, his lips hovering over hers. "Good choice," he murmured. "Now, come here, baby." Evelyn laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Say it again," she challenged. Damien kissed her, a promise of forever sealed on her lips. "I love you," he whispered against her mouth. "Is that slow enough?" The wedding of Damien Moretti and Evelyn Vance was the event of the decade. They didn't hide. They didn't elope. They married in St. Patrick's Cathedral, with the entire city watching. It was a statement. The lion had found his lioness, and the Moretti family was stronger than ever. Evelyn finished law school, graduating top of her class. She didn't become a corporate lawyer. She became the legal counsel for the Moretti legitimate enterprises, turning the family business into an impenetrable fortress of legal steel. She was the velvet glove over Damien's iron fist. Years later, inside the obsidian room, the music was thumping and the drinks were flowing. At table 4, the most powerful couple in New York sat watching the floor. A young, nervous waiter approached with a tray of drinks. His hands were shaking as he placed a glass in front of Damien. The glass wobbled and spilled, splashing onto Damien's cuff. The waiter froze, terrified. The room went silent. Damien looked at the stain, then up at the kid. His eyes were cold. But before he could speak, Evelyn placed a hand on his arm. She leaned in and whispered something in his ear. Damien's expression softened. He looked at his wife, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked back at the waiter. "Accidents happen," Damien said calmly. "Clean it up, and bring my wife another champagne." The waiter scrambled away, breathing a sigh of relief. "You're getting soft, old man," Evelyn teased, sipping her drink. Damien leaned back, draping an arm over her chair, pulling her close. "I'm not soft, I just listen to my boss." Evelyn laughed, the sound ringing out over the club, the sound of a woman who had walked into the fire and come out holding the flame. She was no longer the waitress who whispered a mistake. She was the woman who had tamed the devil, one whisper at a time. And that is the story of how an accidental baby turned a waitress into a mafia queen. It proves that sometimes the biggest mistakes lead to the greatest destinies, and that even the most dangerous men have a weakness. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the underworld with Damien and Evelyn. If you loved the twists, the romance, and the danger, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. I want to know, if you were in Evelyn's shoes, would you have taken the $5 million and run to Paris, or would you have stayed with Damien? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.